Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking again with Susan Dugan about A Course in Miracles, as we often do. And today we thought it'd be appropriate. We're recording this on February 15th, 2018. And so since this is Valentine's week, we thought it might be kind of appropriate to talk about the special relationship, which usually focuses on romantic relationships, that sort of thing. But A Course in Miracles obviously generalizes that to include our relationship to everything and everyone. So we thought we'd go over the section on in chapter 16 in the course's text, which is the illusion and the reality of love. Section 4 of in chapter 16, which is the forgiveness of illusions. And first of all, welcome. Thank you all, as always, Susan, for being here. Do you have any announcements or anything you'd like to share?
I don't.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's easy. I don't think I have either. So I'll just we
Yeah,
can just jump right in then.
nothing
Um,
special.
okay, nothing special. Perfect. Yeah, I was just reviewing Ken's brilliant work. I'll just hold this up here. The Journey Through the Text. This is in volume 2, since it's a 4-volume set, and Ken Wapnick goes through the uh, the text in great detail, as he does with the other 2 volumes. And anyway, so I was looking at his comments on special relationships, which are, as always, brilliant. Um, so he starts out by saying, we examine the special relationship in detail, the ego's substitute for God, and the core of the course's treatment of the ego. He says these relationships keep the thought system of separation, guilt, and attack in place by focusing on the body outside the mind that is the true home of our specialness. The original special relationship is with God, reflecting the decision maker's special relationship with the ego. And even though this occurs in the mind, the creator is conceived as some bodily form that will punish us. Exhibit A,
Yeah,
fundamental religions of all sorts, right?
the
Yeah.
God, the ego. Yes, yeah.
Exactly. And then he continues, we find in the biblical religions, not to mention other cultures, stories of the deity that depict him as a person. This image is then repressed, projected, and repeatedly acted out in special relationships with various figures in our lives, especially those in positions of authority. So this is really an all-encompassing idea that ties into the authority problem that the Course talks about. It talks into the projection of guilt. All these interrelated concepts that are woven together and essentially reach a crescendo, I guess you could say, in the special relationship. And uh, anything you want to say about that first opening comment from Ken? Or?
Well, and I don't have the his. I have the series, The Journey Through the Text, but I don't have that in front of me.
Okay,
But
okay.
but I think that although, as you said, the special relationships. Yeah, I mean that we had a we believed that we pushed our one relationship with ourself and God, the oneness joined as one away. And when we believed the tiny mad idea that we were separate, that we could be separate from, we could create a different reality, a different self than God. And and that's where that idea of we sinned against God and we're guilty of this real crime that really happened, which it didn't, but in our imagination it did. And so a defense became necessary, and hence the entire universe that is created of guilt that the ego projects out there. And so then we're constantly trying to we make up, as you said, a god, an ego god, a god in the ego's image, which is just like a more powerful psychotic human. It's got all the attributes of the ego, only it's more powerful. And now that God is our, although we have a story about how we can be saved through sacrifice, that God is also our enemy. I mean, that God can destroy us and will destroy us. And so in the ego story, we have to begin trying to find a way to save ourselves from that God, and to get rid of the guilt. And so the way that we get rid of it is to project it on each other. And our primary way of making that happen is to find special people that we're with more than others, and that we join either to substitute for the love of God that we think we lack, and to feel that we have some, to have some feeling of we're okay and approval, and we have our needs met, or it's been special hate, and usually it can be the same person because it goes back and forth. In special hate, we're trying to, they can't meet all of our needs, they can't really ultimately fill that lack for us, and so they become the guilty ones in our story, which is our other secret agenda of the ego, to prove I exist at God's expense, but it's not my fault. And so that's what we're always trying to prove in our relationships, and it's exhausting. It never really serves us, and yet this secret allegiance to the ego thought system that we have, because part of the strategy was to forget that we made all of this up, to repress it, to fall into a dream state. That's the analogy that the Course uses. Because we're not aware of any of this, we just, the whole ego's agenda is to not ever get us back to the mind. So this effectively keeps us mindless, even though ultimately it really makes no sense, and it's the only cause of our suffering. And so Jesus is, as our teacher, as our inner teacher, the other part of our mind that didn't take the tiny mad idea of separation seriously, that knew it was mad and remembered to laugh at it. Jesus is now our gentle, loving inner teacher, smiling always, and trying to get us to constantly look with him beside us, because it will be too frightening otherwise, but at the content of what we're doing, at the hate behind the secret, our special love relationships are simply, very, very thin veneers over special hate, and what they're always trying to prove is that hate is real and guilt is real. That going back to that original thought, that it was possible to destroy God, to do something violent to God, and Jesus is trying to get us to see, this is the cause of your suffering, the projection of this idea, but the idea itself is not real, and we have to do that one illusion at a time, one psychotic dream experience with a special relationship at a time, so that we can compare it. We have to be able to look at it, to be able to let it go. And this section talks about, how our job is not to, and we can read it later, but it is to really look for all the not to go directly to love, but to look for all the barriers that we've made, all these illusions that we've made and we're making right now constantly, to keep us mindless, to keep us from love, to keep us believing that we deserve punishment. And so do they, only they deserve it more. and so, but that's what's keeping us miserable. And so we're learning that by changing the purpose of our relationships from this prison in which we are fugitives forever from love and God, to a classroom in which we're in school and using our relationships one episode at a time to learn that we have a different choice, that we are really choosing right now which point of view to experience with, and we can change our mind when we catch ourselves in misery, reacting, judging, feeling anxiety, depression, need, craving, all of it. So anyway.
Very, very well stated.
Thank you.
Eloquently, beautifully stated. Yeah, and it really is just like you say, just an ongoing process. Once we realize that the ego strategy is insane, and its whole approach of trying to suggest that special love and special hate as a substitute for the love of God that we thought we threw away is going to work. And I like how. I'm not sure if it was the Course itself or Ken's commentary that I was just reading, how it's essentially the idea is to get rid of the guilt, but never really leave the home of guilt in the mind, which is the ego. Let's see if I can find where he was saying. Here we go. Projecting the guilt and hate outside as we believe we are safe. The bridge that led us from the mind's guilt to the body, wherein we perceive the locus of the special relationship, is no longer in our awareness, and we magically believe we are free to the horrible burden of guilt. This explains the burning need to observe sin in everyone else. And the irony, of course, is that in the special love relationship, which usually starts out, not that it cannot start with one and go to the other, it's really interchangeable, but a typical relationship where we think, oh, this is going to do it for us, whether it's a person or a thing or a substance or a situation or a job or, a car, house,
right,
money, the whole gamut of stuff, health regimen. Obviously the special love relationship in terms of romantic ones are just sort of the cliche. If we can look at that and say, wow, I'm really trying to replace something that on some deep level, I knew I never left with something that I know is not going to work. The insanity of that, after we look at it consistently, like you say, with the Holy Spirit's help, because otherwise we wouldn't want to do it and it would be just too unbearable. But when we look at it with Holy Spirit, we see there's nothing to it. It's really unfounded. But then it becomes more comfortable to see that.
It takes, I just said eventually, because it isn't like always an instant
right
change. We're very resistant to this. We're
exactly
very invested in the special relationship. And so we want to deny it, because the idea of me is kept together ultimately through projecting everything outside the mind. I follow this idea of me into the dream and forget that that's not what I am. And so now I'm really invested in making that guilt and making my body and other bodies real. So, we can't do this all at once. And it takes a lot of practice and a lot of vigilance and willingness over time. As you and I both know, we've been practicing for some time, and it's a journey. It's not. We see through that practice of really trying to apply this in our lives that Jesus is also, that everything he says is true, that we're terrified of this, that we don't, we're completely confused about what we are. And the actual, the more we look, the more we begin to see that he's right about the pain of what we're doing. But we still have to develop that trust over usually a lot of time and practice to begin to have faith that we are something beyond this, because that's not our experience.
Exactly.
And the thought of it sounds like death to us to become an abstract union. What does that mean? The idea of disappearing into the heart of God, is usually strikes fear into most people. Although, if you really think about it, do you really want to disappear as you into the heart of God? And what the hell is the heart of God? We don't know. So, we've forgotten love, what real love is, unconditional love for all, including, what seems to be victims and victimizers here. All of that hierarchy of illusions has to go too, eventually. Not all at once. This is a gradual process. But how we get there is by looking at whatever's, at catching ourselves as we react to something seemingly external, usually perpetrated by another body, or something within our own body that works too, physical or emotional body, and beginning to question the cause of our reaction and recognize I must be, if Jesus is right and I'm drawn to what he's saying, and I know I recognize somewhere within the truth of what he's saying and the love behind it, then I'm going to have to question, as the Course tells us in the workbook, every value that I hold. And but I'm not alone, and Jesus doesn't expect us to do it all at once, and so we can, very little by little, with each reaction, begin to just say, do I really want this? And in very practical terms, to give an example for if there's anyone listening that, what does this mean in your life? It's really an example that I would use as my daughter, where, over time, I came to the Course when she was 11 and really got to practice this whole process and learn it. And I'm still learning it, of course, but through, through the time that she went through puberty and becoming a teenager and separating from home and going off to college and then eventually leaving home and all of that. And so I've really been able to watch my neediness throughout this process, at different stages of our seeming roles, even though, parent and children roles seem very unequal in form, but in truth, we're both fragments of the decision-making mind, and we're both special relationships of each other that we're using for our own reasons, which are always the same reason, ultimately, to prove we exist, but it's not our fault, or to get our needs met.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a really great practice over time in a long-term relationship like that to see how, although I would say that she is the love of my life. I mean, the love, my ultimate special love relationship. I've really seen and experienced over time how what Jesus is saying is correct too, that it's really unkind the way we're using each other, that neediness is never really really kind, or helpful. And so I'm learning as a mom to drop the need and to learn to truly love her and see her as not as a child, but as a sister and a brother, just like everyone else that's trying to find her way home and has her own atonement path. And, just like I do. And we don't know what that looks like in form, but we know that at the level of the mind, we're all trying to discover the same truth about ourselves. And I mean, in the right mind. And then, we're all trying to root ourselves more deeply in the dream when we're in the wrong mind, when we've chosen the ego as our teacher. So, we really are the same. And that's how our special relationships are such great teachers for us.
Definitely.
And I mean, and wives and husbands, and I mean, all of those really close relationships, although it refers to something much broader than that, those really can be very, very powerful classrooms for us over time to let go of this, to have Jesus teach us that we don't really want this guilt anymore, that making it real is harming us, and that we can trust that there's something else better on the other side,
Exactly.
So,
yeah, as you're saying that, I was thinking how important and useful just that one word to look at with the Holy Spirit, look at with our inner kindness teacher, aka Jesus of the Course, is neediness and needs.
Yeah.
And of course, says, in referring to our decision-making mind in alignment with that awareness, I need do nothing, not that we don't do anything in the world. And then also the other favorite, my favorite quote from the Song of Prayer is, the secret of true prayer is to forget the things you think you need. And of course, the way it seems like the way to get that is just what you're just describing in detail, is by looking moment to moment with that inner kindness teacher at all the things that come up on our mind, and rather than recoiling in terror and running screaming mad from wherever we think we are, if we try to do this in isolation, but if we do it with that loving presence that we took with us into the dream, we can see that this is just silliness. It's just craziness to think that there's something that seems to be outside of ourselves. That as the section points out, that it seems to be outside of us, but it's really something that we made up as a barrier to love. And I think the classic line of this section is, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you've built against it. And our special love hate relationships really are just a classic example of those barriers, aren't they? I put a little note in my margin here, just something fun as kind of a mnemonic device, is the special love becomes special hate in the same way that it starts as infatuation, but then it turns to insinuation. And but if there's no thickness to it, there's no dimension to real love, because love makes no comparisons and it doesn't judge. And when some of Ken's comments in there in that journey through the text, I thought were were astute. He was saying, you know, love makes no comparisons, and also, it doesn't judge, it's not subject to, it's not a, it's subject to change, and it's not, interested in whims. So all the things that come and go, the fleeting things,
Right.
it's not really what really is going to truly satisfy us. And those are all the substitutes that take the form of the specialness that we know is going to disappoint us, and we on unconscious level set ourselves up for those failures until we start seeing the habit, just like Charlie Brown eventually seeing Lucy set up the football every year, and she's going to pull it away and he's going to land flat on his back, and it's like, okay, I fell for it again, until, wait a minute, maybe I don't have to do that. Or like on, since this is also Groundhog Day month,
Right.
like Bill Murray's character finally realized, I don't have to step in that puddle, and I can, learn to catch the kid as he falls out of the tree and fix the flat tire, and turn my life around, and not make it about what's in it for me, but turn it, into, well, how can I truly be interested in the shared interest of everyone, not just the special relationships. And anyway.
And really, again, that comes from seeing how much I don't want to see shared interests, how much I want to make comparisons, how much I want to make want to make differences real, not just real, but really important. I want to make decisions based on differences. I want to exclude or include based on differences. I want to make certain people extraordinary and certain people not worthy, and all of that stuff that we do, to see how that is ultimately just really not serving me. Not only is it not serving me, it's really it is the cause. And as you're saying too, that that lack that we feel, it never gets filled. It never, Ken used to say that we're need machines, and it is like that. It's like this robotic, constant craving that, just I need to have more. I have to have my, I remember when my daughter went to college, and there was like a weekend for parents, an orientation thing, and there were all these different activities. But one of them was some psychologist that was talking at the time, and she was talking about how, the weaning of the parent from the relationship with the child. Maybe that's our generation. We've been really into that, but that they've done studies, and what is it? It's not the drug, but I think it's oxytocin is the chemical, the brain chemical, or is that the drug? But
OxyContin, I think, is the drug, and oxytocin is the natural,
the neurotransmitter or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so that, talking with your kids actually will give you the hit of oxytocin, that because you're going to be going through withdrawal oxytocin. So I mean, it's true that it really is within the body, or the ego thought system, that we physically crave and need others. We need, this dependent kind of, we need others to need us, and we need to need them, and when we don't have them, I mean, we know what happens to babies that aren't held, that don't get to bond with a parent, and they can end up very screwed up. And
solitary confinement in prisons is like the worst punishment,
Right. And actually, when we've chosen the ego, as we practice this, we begin to, I really experience when I am resistant to changing my mind, and I have chosen the ego, and I'm in that state of judgment and hate, and which we become much more in touch with through this practice. It feels like being in solitary confinement. It's back to that no one gets me, no one understands me, no one, the horror of what we did, the guilt over what we did. We feel really that badly about it ourselves. The self-hatred is that deep that we kind of think we deserve to be in solitary confinement,
I'm laughing a little bit thinking about, I think it was like a Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor movie where they were locked up, and I might be confusing or conflating a couple movies, but anyway, there was one where where he's locked up and put in solitary. And well, the first part is they hang him on a rack, and he said, "Oh, that's just after taking him down for several days, just what I needed to straighten out the problem I was having with my back." And said, "Okay, now we'll put you in solitary." And then he gets out a few days later. Says, "Oh, I really got into myself, really got in a deep meditative state." Now this is just kind of humorous because normally, people dread that kind of experience
Right.
because of the connotations, and we're not suggesting on the level of form that we should go live in a cave or anything like that, but
Right.
the
Or make
idea,
lightly of the situation that people would feel that, yeah, right.
yeah, but I think the irony, of course, is that ultimately there really is only one of us in truth, but that's
Right.
obviously not our experience here in this world of incredible diversity and duality. But ultimately we need to be comfortable with all the aspects of that self and recognize how we, by making special love partners and relationships out of everyone and everything, we essentially are isolating ourselves from each other in truth.
Especially with special hate. I mean,
Yeah.
we special hate relationships for the very same goal. And it is to prove that I'll never make it home because I can't stop judging you. I mean, we all have that. We know that, and often it can be sometimes a special, both. I mean, a special love and hate. I need you, but I also, like, you drive me insane. I mean, and that's and it's and over time, I mean, I've really worked with this too in my relationship with my husband, and I see now how much I've just, I've just made this up. I mean, it's not that it really has nothing to do with him. I mean, he's just doing what he does from his personality. It has nothing. It's not personal. It's not, and yet we take it. It's what we reach for to prove that we are under attack and we are discounted and we are, this person that was supposed to meet my needs is not sensitive at all to my needs, and deliberately does these certain things that he knows annoy me, and blah blah blah. Whatever stories we're telling ourselves, and they're stories,
Right.
and there's stories that when the course tells us, when we become afraid of love, we reach for our friend the ego. We try to prove again that it doesn't exist. I exist at God's expense, but it's not my fault. But I really exist, and guilt is the glue that keeps me together.
Yep.
And we're in my class on Tuesday nights. We're going through the obstacles to peace, and we were reading some of that the other night, the section about the hungry dogs of fear. And it's just it's we are I mean, we're sending out the hungry dogs of fear, and having that's our projections, and having them come back and attack us, and we were laughing over the, thinking it's like that old commercial that beef, it's what's for dinner. Well, it's guilt, it's what's for dinner. And so yeah, I mean, it's that's what we're doing, and yet the need of every heart, going back to the quotes about the need, the course says the need of every heart, and I'm paraphrasing the rest of that, but is really to learn, to find my way home, to learn that we're innocent, to learn that we're the same, that no matter what I've done, I mean, God, God welcomes me home, and all we really have in common is our same need to awaken from the stream of sin, guilt, and fear.
Yeah, that's our only real need.
Yeah, it's our only real need,
Yeah.
and everybody here is fighting the same hard battle of proving that we really are separate, and it's not working out well for any of us. And it's to the ego that's impossible to believe, because the ego depends on this hierarchy of illusions in which the ego will always scream when we read that or speak it, that no, look at what happened, look at this, look at what just happened at the horrible shooting in Florida. In form there's wild differences in how people are acting out, but in content, from the course's perspective, hate is hate.
Mhm.
And, you know, I mean, who knows what any of us would do if we thought we could get away with it? You know, there's times when we are all absolutely insane. And if
We
we've chosen the ego, we are insane.
we might
We
even
might
make up a
even
whole
make a whole
universe, the
universe.
space and time.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. As
What you're saying reminded me of some of Ken's comments here. I'll just, if you will, just read a short paragraph here. He's talking about, it says, our symphony's important theme of purpose returns. The value of the special relationship does not lie within itself, since it is inherently nothing, but rather in the purpose it serves in seeing guilt in someone other than ourselves, which we justify by erecting barricades of anger. When we find such special persons, we love them, whether the relationship takes a loving or hateful form. You know, loving in the quotes here.
Right.
What we truly love is the ego's hidden purpose of protecting our self-hate that the specialness brings about. The guilt, the bedrock of our self-concept as separate selves, is allowed to flourish behind the citadels of specialness and just beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. So that's where I think the mindfulness comes in, and the patience and the diligence and the gentleness to just keep looking and looking and looking at all the imagined needs and fabricated desires and wants and the stuff that we think we're going to get out of the world, and just really be gentle with ourselves as those come up again and again, and we look at them with our inner kindness teacher and say, oh yeah, I've just made a special relationship about this and this and this and this, and this. And just watch those without condemnation, without self incrimination, and just see that's not going to work either. That's not going to work either. And pretty soon we can catch ourselves before we get to the special hate phase. If not that it always goes from special love to special hate, but a typical kind of involvement, engagement with whatever it's a person, place, or thing, event, circumstance. It often goes from special love to special hate. If we can kind of catch the first, oh, this is gonna make me happy kind of thing, and recognize how much specialness am I investing in it right at the onset. Pretty soon we can begin to have the gentle inner smile before we go
yeah,
headlong into the, oh, I'm going to start making a big deal about this kind of thing, and just watch it, and just see where it goes.
right. Unless we're really fearful, and then we may just charge right in there.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, we have growing awareness of what we're doing, and
yeah, exactly.
I think that is what does really profoundly change over time from this practice. Is it's like you're busted all the time. You can't really,
I like that.
ever be mindless completely anymore. And I mean, you can have great, colossal ego attacks still, but you kind of know.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That knows that it's not, it has nothing to do with this person.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that you're wrong about the whole thing. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's sort of like we've peeled off the masking tape over the dashboard idiot lights,
Yeah.
that we used to cover up and on pain of death, no one dare, pull those pieces of tape off the dashboard, because I don't want to see, what's really going on in my mind. But now the Holy Spirit says, okay, just peel back a little at a time, and pretty soon we see the whole desolation. And since that awareness teaches through the law of contrast and through cognitive dissonance, we begin to see, there really isn't a whole lot left there to that ego thought system that's really got any appeal for me. But we have to look at what seemed to be the appeal, the attraction of guilt and death and all that stuff, and the obstacles to peace, like you're talking about, and see that those really don't have a decent payoff.
Right. And I think you can't skip the experience, the feeling the pain of this. It is very painful, and there's definitely a sense, at times you feel very disoriented. You feel you can go into states of fear, and so again, it's so important when those kinds of feelings and resistance is showing up in those ways, to just, if all you can do is just remind yourself that Jesus doesn't go anywhere, that that light is still within me, is still with me, whether I'm feeling it or not. again, there you've opened the door a little bit to that light, and you're not completely in the ego thought system if you're able to at least know that you're still going home. I mean, sometimes that's if I'm in a particularly fearful state, it's helpful to just remind myself that I'm still going home.
Mm-hmm.
This will pass, and I've been through rough times with this course before, and it's part of the process. And again, that gets back to judging yourself less and less over it, because the truth is, if we've chosen the ego, it is a given that we are going to be in a bad place, and we're much more able to look at it, as this is saying. It must mean that some of our fear is being eroded through this process, or we wouldn't be able to see the hate that's really there,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
call it for what it is. Yeah.
I always like to remind myself too that if I'm looking at the ego shenanigans, particularly if I'm looking without condemnation, the only way I could be doing that is with Holy Spirit's help, with Jesus's
Right.
perspective.
That's right.
And so I must be in
You
my
must
right mind.
be
Yeah, yeah. And like Ken says, is that he oftentimes talks about the secret of, or the idea of doing the workbook, for example, correctly, is to do it poorly, and notice all the resistance, and then forgive yourself. And I think it you know having invested and bought sort of the season tickets to the ego's drama, if we recognize, every year we keep shelling out this huge exorbitant fee for a not very pleasant experience, if we can just say, well, maybe next year I'll just pick and choose rather than buy a season pass, and pretty soon, maybe I'll just go to one or two games, and then pretty soon it's like, well, maybe I'll just skip the whole thing altogether and go fishing or whatever, go for a walk instead. It may be not the best analogy, but eventually we realize that the mileage that we thought we were getting from our special relationships really hasn't paid off. And I love your phrase that, how's that working out for you?
right. Right.
That's such a good reminder that, if we just kind of, and as you were saying, look honestly, and allow ourselves to feel when we're in that state,
Right.
when we're out of balance and out of kilter, and having, chosen an insane thought system, to just look at it and stop and wait and judge not, as page 401 says.
To fix it or change it or run away.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just giving power to what isn't really real. I mean, but that does require that you kind of stay with it a little bit,
Right.
which is uncomfortable. We're not used to doing that. We're
Exactly.
used to, filling the lack, covering it over, running away from it, denying it, not looking, and so there's definitely discomfort that goes with this. And the other thing that I was thinking while you were talking was, it's so tempting, especially in the beginning, which can last for a very long time. We want to believe that it's I see the ego, someone else has choosing their ego, but there's no one else choosing their ego. This is always my mind in need of healing that I'm looking at. If I'm noticing someone else's ego, that's my bad.
Yeah, tag I'm it. Yeah, as Deb Fishman says, if you spot it, you got it. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it would not. Nothing outside me has the power to take my peace away. And if anything outside me is taking my peace away in any way, or causing me to judge another in any way, to make some sort of difference between us real. They're choosing their ego. I'm not choosing my ego. Well, what is that again? So there's only one ego that we are ever talking about here. It has multiple expressions, but I'm not responsible for someone else's ego attack, but I'm responsible if I join with it. And by judging them, and it being the problem being in them, then I am joining with it. And so it's always, I chose the ego right now, and I need help.
Yeah, if that's the great acid test, isn't it? If I'm upset by whatever appears to be coming to me is really coming back to me,
That's
from
the
me.
bottom line. Yeah.
But if I'm upset by it,
Right.
that's the clue right there, that I'm still got the tether, in the level of mind, and to the idea and the thought system that seems to make that possible. But it's only by being present with it, being mindful, and just looking at it, and
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 that's
just
that practice of, just really trying to be present throughout the day, and checking in. And, the Course gives us those sort of ways to frame our day, with the rules for decision is one section, and the how does a teacher of God spend his day in the manual for teachers is another section, where, and I think I'm blanking on the workbook lesson right now, but there's another workbook lesson that does that, pretty predominantly.
Mhm.
But it's a matter of, we have to be really kind of set this as our goal. We're in school. We have to start our day with with setting our intention and our purpose to. I like the prayer at the end of the workbook at the very last lesson, in part 2, which is, be you in charge that I may follow you. That's just part of it. Certain your direction brings me peace. But, to put Jesus as my teacher, remind ourselves that we're in school. I'm a student, and I need to bring my teacher with me today, and everything that comes, and then help me to see everything with you, and to notice when I'm arguing with something external in the dream, and judging something, and upset, and remember to come back to you. And that's something that we need to kind of check in with throughout. Which teacher am I choosing right now? Whenever we're upset, or even when we're just kind of daydreaming, or because often our thoughts are concealed. And so and then at night, Jesus tells us to put him in charge of our dreams too, our sleeping dreams, just as we do our waking dreams, so that we have our teacher with us intentionally, and that's our goal. And I think really that's Ken always said, that this course is, the purpose is everything in this course, and there's only two. And there's only two teachers in the mind: the ego, or Jesus, Holy Spirit. And there's the two choices between them, and one will lead to rooting me more deeply in the dream, and one will lead me to taking another step toward awakening. And I have that choice every minute.
So simple, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So we could probably stop there, unless you want to
I
conclude.
think I think I think there's a lot more to cover, but we could certainly call it a wrap on this particular
Yeah.
conversation. Anything else you want to share? Well,
I don't think so. I mean, I'm just still teaching my Tuesday class, and
yeah,
and
right.
trying to remember I'm in school. So
Exactly. Yeah, for
yeah,
anybody who's in the Denver area, I highly recommend Susan's Tuesday evening class at the Rocky Mountain Miracle Center, and you can go to RockyMountainMiracleCenter.org to find out about Susan's classes, as well as Lynn Crone and Tim Wise and other course teachers there that are doing wonderful
yeah.
stuff. So anyway, thanks again, Susan, and
Thank you.
um, happy Valentine's week, and may we all be mindful about our specialness, and learn to laugh gently at those times when we think that
Right.
they can do something for us.
Yeah, exactly. Remember it next year when you're shopping for Valentine's Day cards,
Yeah,
and find yourself reacting.
really.
So thank you, Bruce.
Thanks again. I've been speaking with Susan Dugan. Her website is foraysinforgiveness.com, and I've also got one on A Course in Miracles that's aciandblog.com. And we'll look forward to talking with you next time. Bye for now.